if Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi is to believe, as he said, the fact that this upstart five-star movement took over the mayor's seat in Rome and in turn should not be compared to Brexit. It's more a vote on local issues and not a bigger thing. I mean, that was kind of the spin he was putting on it. He's right, and then he's not right at the same time, because obviously anytime a non-mainstream party wins a major city, that's a defeat for traditional politics. So I think we should see it in that context, but obviously some of these local elections are based on local issues like trash collection and potholes, and not about bigger issues about national identity in Italy, or certainly I don't think it can be entirely compared to Brexit. But again, it's in the context of these smaller upstart movements that we haven't, that are just new and are gaining more and more momentum.
And this Monday, the leader of that movement, the satirist Beppe Grillo, saying that this was effectively going to be a springboard to national politics.
That's what he hopes. I mean, this is a party that was begun, as you say, by the satirist, this comedian, Beppe Grillo. He founded the party in 2009, and it has gained momentum since then. He is seen as this super charismatic guy. It began as a protest movement with a lot of online protests. I mean, it's important, I think, to note that what we're seeing is internet-driven activism after an era dominated by Silvio Berlusconi, who, as we know, was a master at television. So this is kind of a grassroots upstart movement, and it could spread. The thing is that it really has to do with the challenges, difficulties, and internal implosion of the center-right and center-left parties in Italy. That is the greatest thing fueling the success of the five-star movement.
Okay, the center-right, we've seen it a bit since Berlusconi started to fade into the sunset a little bit more. The center-right, we've seen it, but the center-left, I mean, Renzi has a majority. He won big in European elections last year. The big losses, 67% in Rome, a 10-point loss in Turin. Is that the beginning of the end for Renzi?
I don't think it's the beginning of the end for Renzi, but Renzi is young. He took over the leadership of the PD party in February of 2014, and he did it in order to show that this mainstream party can capture the kind of anti-system momentum that parties like the five-star movement have been expressing. I mean, it was his way of saying, hey, I can be the outsider too. You don't just have to vote for the outsider. I think the fact that the city of Rome lost the mayorship to the five-star movement is very much a sign of the difficulties inside the PD. Let's talk a little bit about what the PD is. It is a center-left party that has always suffered from internal contradictions, whether that's the contradictions between former Christian Democrats and former communists, or whether it's generational contradictions, not so much contradictions, but tension. Older guard that are more affiliated with labor unions. Labor unions in Italy now represent more retirees than young people, than workers. And so young people say, what's our future in the left? So instead of voting for the center-left, Renzi's party, a lot of them are now voting for the five-star movement. Hence, they won in Turin, stronghold of Fiat, and in Rome.
So how does this bode for that big referendum? Because the big election, people are saying, is this referendum later in the year to reform Italy's institutions. And does this put Renzi in a difficult spot?
I think it does put him in a difficult spot. I don't think it means he'll necessarily lose the referendum, but Renzi called this referendum as a referendum on his government. He took over the party leadership without direct national elections, and so he's saying, if I can't pass these reforms, then I'll resign. Whether he will or not, I don't know, but I think that the five-star movement has said it'll vote against the referendum. The referendum is to streamline Italy's very blocked political process. So it seems like anyone who wants to vote against it is voting against Renzi and not necessarily against the referendum itself, which doesn't seem like a terribly nasty thing, you know, to want to make the system work better. So I don't know if it'll definitely, I think it'll be harder for him, but I don't think he's necessarily lost that.
All right, down but not out. Let's go back a minute to what happened in Rome especially, because Virginia Raggi, 37, people are hailing it as after Paris, Rome breaks the glass ceiling when it comes to municipal politics. On the other hand, they're saying, well, after the first round, she said she would unveil her cabinet team. I think she only rolled out 4 people in sum total. People are wondering, is she really going to be able to clean up the city?
That's a really big question. I think the first question to ask anyone who's running for mayor of Rome is, why on earth would you want to be mayor of Rome? It's a really difficult city to govern, and she has a really tough job ahead of her. I do think it is exciting that it is a young, dynamic woman who's taken over. It's so rare in Italy. Under Berlusconi, there were young women in parliament, in the European Parliament. That was often seen as they were chosen based on their headshots. I mean, that was the kind of Berlusconi-era scandal. Here we see that the Five-Star Movement really has championed these young women who are a sign of something new and young and trying to change traditional politics. But Rome is so hard to govern. I mean, there are a lot of complicated questions here. There was a corruption scandal. Previous right-wing administration had been, millions of dollars were stolen by the administration. So it's really...
It's going to take someone strong. And here's the question is she her own woman? Because what is it? The people who run are described as, the term is grillini, is that it? That they sort of have to report to head office before they decide anything. Is she going to be the boss?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, that's a question that's often asked of women who are running for office, like who's really in charge. And I actually think that in this case, it's a young party. It's a party that is... Who is actually in charge of the party? Is it Beppe Grillo? Has he stepped back? Which vested interests want her to succeed? Which ones want her to fail? It's an extremely challenging job. If she can be her own woman, maybe she'll push through important changes and help govern Rome. But I think that the real loser in this election is the center-left party of Matteo Renzi in Rome, which they kind of hung out the previous mayor to dry, Ignazio Marino. He had to resign after not being able to handle a corruption scandal very well. And so who is actually ever behind anyone in Rome City Hall is a big question. I don't think Virginia Raggi is the first person about whom that question has been asked.
67% she got.
Yeah, but I mean, it's because the center-right was involved in this corruption scandal. The center-left didn't handle the scandal that it inherited very well, and some people say that Renzi's party hung out the previous mayor to dry. So really, it's as much a sign of internal tensions as it is about anti-establishment parties taking over Italy.